I think it's no secret that I'm dropping a cargo pants tutorial for beginners, hoping to drop that soon. And part of building that DIY is making cargo pockets. There's so many different types of cargo pockets. They have tucks on them, they have accordion sides, so when you put stuff in it expands. But you generally find those on the side of pants. You don't really find them on the rear because the rear usually has a patch pocket or a welt pocket with a cover on it, because you don't need that expansion feature. Otherwise, you're gonna load your back pocket with stuff. It's gonna sag out, and then your ass is just gonna look like it's sagging. You don't want that. So today we're gonna build the rear cargo pockets. The fun part about creating cargo pockets is you can customize the shape. So for this one, I have the slanted edges, but you could do straight corners, you could do 1 point, you could do 1 button, 2 buttons, you could do rounded corners. It's really up to you, it depends on your style. I'd highly recommend doing the cargo pocket tutorial before the pants tutorial drops, so you can get some practice in, and you can also figure out what kind of design or style you want it to be, whether you want buttons, you want Velcro, you want like slanted corners, rounded corners. You can figure all that kind of stuff out before the pants tutorial. That way when the finale does drop and the kit's out, you know exactly what pocket you want. You're ready to start creating, ready to sew. So let me show you today how you can sew rear cargo pockets. Step numero uno, print out the PDF. There's a link in the description with a PDF. You can print it at home. Just make sure you print it 100% to scale, because that's kind of key for sizing. And print it out. Get your craft scissors and cut it out. You'll only need a 1/4 yard of fabric, which on a 60-inch roll is plenty of fabric for 2 pockets, maybe even 3 pockets, and still have some in case, you know, mistakes. You can also add interfacing. That'll add more structure to your flaps. And if you do, you just cut the same paper pattern on the interfacing, and if it's fusible, fuse it to the wrong side of the fabrics. Tip number 1 is to check the orientation of your paper pattern and fabric. There's a grain line symbol to match with the selvage edge, and this will ensure that the weaves or the prints of your fabric match up when both the flap and the pocket are beside each other. With the sewing pattern on top of your fabric, we can't use clips for this one to hold it down because there's no edge. So sadly, we got to use these sharp little pins. Grab some pins, pin the paper pattern down to the fabric. Then grab your rotary cutters or scissors, fabric scissors, and cut out the panels. Tip number 2 is that if you are planning on making 2 or more pockets, then you should group your activities. So if you're making this for a project, you should cut 2 now or 3 now, because grouping your activities makes your work just a little bit more efficient, saving you some time. And tip number 3, make sure you read the patterns. If it says cut 2, make sure you're cutting 2. Before we start sewing, we got to plan out what we want to use to close the flap. Do you want to use Velcro, buttons, or snaps? Because planning ahead is key for sewing smart. I feel like people are less likely to have the tools and supplies for snaps, so we'll pass on that. And I've already used Velcro in the other 3D cargo pocket tutorial that I've done, so we'll also pass on that. And that leaves us with buttons. These are custom GA021 DIY buttons. They're about 3/4 inches wide. There's a link below if you want some for this or other projects. And also would love to know what y'all think about these buttons if you want to leave a comment below. So we got our fabric, we got our supplies, we're all prepped. It's time to start sewing. So get those sewing machines out and warmed up because we're about to get into it. We'll start with panel 1. We're going to have the wrong sides on top. And how you can tell between the right and wrong side, especially for twill, is the right side has these clean diagonal weaves. It's a bit shinier versus the wrong side has a little less shine and not as clear of lines, so we know it's the wrong side. On the top edge of the wrong side, we're going to draw a chalk line at 3/4 inch down from that top edge. We're going to then draw a second line that's 2.5 inches down from the top edge, or alternatively, you could draw a line that's 1 3/4 inch lower than the previous line. These are going to be the fold lines where we match our edge to fold. When you're ready, bring that top edge in line with the 3/4 inch chalk line and press with your fingers and then press with the iron. When you're done that, bring the folded edge in line with the 2.5 1-inch chalk line, and do a little finger press and then press with an iron. You'll be surprised how helpful a little finger press could be. We're going to set up our sewing machine here. So we have the tension at 4, width is 0, length is 2.5, and it's going to be a straight stitch. We're going to do a top stitch 1 inch from the folded edge, and this should catch the bottom folded piece. You can either use chalk to make a 1-inch guideline of where you'll sew, or you could just bring your fabric up to the machine, and on your throat plate you might have these little measurement markers. We'll line it up to the 1-inch mark, lower the press foot, and sew that 1-inch top stitch. Regardless of how you plan on doing that, make sure you backstitch at the beginning and end. With chalk on the wrong side, we're going to draw 3/4 of an inch all the way around as guides for folding, except we won't do this on the top folded edge. After, we're going to match the edges with our fold lines. We're going to do a finger press, then grab our hot iron and press it down. Alright, now we got our patch pocket shape done. Let's put that aside to cool and move on to the flap. For our rear pocket flap, we should have 2 pieces. We're going to match right sides together, and you can either draw 3/8 of a chalk line all around as a guide, or you could just sew 3/8 of an inch without the chalk using the throat plate measurements again. Grab your clips so we can start sewing. Once it's clipped together, we have right sides together. We're going to sew 3/8 of around except for this long top edge. Throw it back under the machine. Don't forget to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end, and just take out the clips as you continue to sew. For the turn, we're going to have the needle in the down position, lift the presser foot up, pivot the fabric, put the presser foot down, and then keep sewing. Some tips for the turn. You can use your hand wheel for control. So if you're coming up to a turn but you don't feel like you can control the needle confidently with the foot pedal, you can use the hand wheel. Just turn it towards you, aka counterclockwise, to control the needle. Tip number 2, if you want to test the turn, you can have the needle in down position, pull the press foot up, and pivot the fabric. And if it doesn't look like you're close enough to the edge, you can always return it to the original position. Just remember not to do it too often, or you might end up with wobbly stitches. And tip number 3, if you're close to turning but you need one more stitch, but you think that last stitch is going to put you too far, then you can reduce the stitch length and use the hand wheel to give you one little bump, just a little bit creep up forward. Just remember to return back to your original settings before you start sewing again. Now we're going to reduce the bulk. We're going to cut the corners of our fabric. Just remember not to cut too close to the stitches or they might fall out. And then we're going to flip it inside out so right sides are on the outside. Sometimes I'll use a chopstick to help push these corners out. It's blunted enough that it won't feed through and break any stitches. And once you feel confident, you can try to press the seams. It helps if you could squeeze the iron on the inside, on the short edges or the long edge to help break up the seam before we press it on the right side. Or even if you can finger press the inside, that way it'll flatten out the seams for when we're ready to fold it on the outside. Once you feel confident, iron all around the edges. Now we're going to do 2 top stitches. The first one's going to be 3/8 of an inch from the edge, and we're going to do the same drill as before. When you get to the turns, needle down, press your foot up, turn the fabric, press your foot down, and continue sewing. And then we're going to do the second one as an edge stitch. So we're going to basically sew as close to the edge as possible. I got this edge stitch presser foot with a little guide that helps me. And this is going to lock in the shape of our cargo flap. It's time to work on the buttonhole placement. So grab your chalk. We're going to draw a line 1/4 of an inch down from the long top edge, the non-folded side or the raw edge. And then we'll find the center spot. So we'll divide the width by 2 and mark it, and then measure 1.25 inches from the bottom edge, which gives us our center. Place the button on this center spot. Mark the top and bottom with your chalk, as this will be the start and end lines for your buttonhole. Most machines these days come with a setting that automatically creates consistent buttonholes. Although the steps might differ a little bit slightly between models, I'd imagine the process is still very similar. Replace the press foot, add the button, line up to the buttonhole markers, change the settings, and just let the machine do the work. There are buttonhole punches or buttonhole sets, basically like a sharp chisel looking tool that you can get a nice clean cut. But I don't have that right now, so I'm just going to use a seam ripper and cut the hole open. It's time to do the pocket placement, and once we're done that, we'll attach the flap and buttons and be done. So to find the pocket placement, it's going to be based on your pattern, and I don't have the cargo pants tutorial done yet, so I'm just going to place it on this delicious looking fabric that's the same color as chocolate milk. Then grab your pins. Another example where even though we like to use clips a lot, we still got to use pins sometimes. Once you're ready, we're going to top stitch the rear cargo pocket to the pants around the edges. We're going to do every edge except for the top because we want to keep the pocket open. So I'll put a clip here as a reminder not to sew here. We're going to do a stitch 3/8 of an inch around, and then we're going to do an edge top stitch or an edge stitch. Then we're going to add bar tacks. So bar tacks are like these very little tightly knit stitches, kind of like a very narrow zigzag stitch. And they're usually put in these high stress areas to help secure your stitches. So we're going to do a set of bar tacks at the top. We're going to connect the two top stitches, and it's going to be about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. We're going to change our sewing machine settings to a zigzag stitch, change the length to 0.1 and a width of 1.5. And we're going to do a few reverse stitches at the beginning, at the end, kind of like a back stitch. There are machines dedicated to creating bar tack stitches, but we're just going to mimic it with these very tight, narrow zigzag stitches on our own machines. And when you're done, don't forget to switch back to your normal sewing machine settings. Now onto the pocket flap placement. Draw a 1/4 inch line above the rear cargo pocket with chalk. Then grab your pocket flap, and with the raw edge, we're going to line it up to that chalk line. We're going to grab some pins, we're going to pin it down, and then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch from that raw edge. When that's sewed down, it's secured, it's got a nice stitch because you're nice with it. We're going to fold that cargo flap down. We're going to use our fingers, we're going to do a finger press, and we're going to straighten out the fabric underneath so that nothing's pulling. We're going to grab our hot iron and we're going to press down the fold. And we also want to press down that fabric that it's held onto. So we want to make sure everything's neat. And when everything's pressed, it's looking real clean. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the edge. Following that, we're going to do bar tack stitch, connecting the two top stitches together as well on both the left and right side. So change your sewing machine back to our bar tack sewing machine settings. However, there will be lots and lots of layers under here. So if your machine's more on the delicate side, maybe consider skipping this step. Or if you are doing this, you just might have to use your hands a little bit more to assist the fabric being fed by the machine, a little bit more than you typically would. And then for the buttonhole placement, I still have that center chalk mark when I lift up the flap from before. So I'm going to use that to mark my button center, or the buttonhole center where my button will be. I'm going to replace the buttonhole presser foot. I'm also going to open up the free arm. I feel like people always forget to drop the feed dogs with the switch at the back. So here's your friendly little reminder. And I guess you don't really need too much info here because I do have a button tutorial on my channel, which you could check out for more details. And that's how you do a cargo pocket. If you want early access to the cargo pants tutorial, you could sign up for my email newsletter. There's a link in the description below because they get first access to all my DIYs, new videos. So if you want in on that, sign up. And until next time, peace.